ideas, bring your voice. King Arthur had nothing on us here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com.
Hi, everybody. It's me, the Fetch, host of Inside the Eye Live. Before the Sunday mainstream media political pundit talk shows, there is Inside the Eye Live, where we break down some of the weekly mainstream media talking points before the talking points even get aired. Add in some entertaining stories, weather, cats, intriguing and informative guests, and you get one of the most listened to Saturday morning streaming media political talk shows going today. And it's all right here on our flagship station, Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. So join me, the Fetch, for Inside the Eye Live every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock a.m. Eastern. It is truly intelligent media for the politically aware.
This is Thomas, a.k.a. a Mad Painter. I'd like you to join me Monday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for Open Canvas. Don't forget to bring an open mind.
Yes, folks, that's right. Bring an open mind to an open canvas. Again, that is Monday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern. UFOs to government corruption. This is Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You don't need to expect us. We're already here.
Many years from now, would you be willing to trade all the days from this day to that for one chance, just one chance, to come back here and tell our enemies that they may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom?
The future is uncertain. I know this. Death is inevitable. I know this. But one thing is certain, as free men, it is our right to live unencumbered and in peace. And those times are quickly drawing to an end. And in these times, peace is certainly an illusion, and as the chains grow tighter, our ability to slip those chains increase incrementally with every passing moment. Inaction is no longer an option. It's time to raise our voices like a cacophony of thunder and lightning and tell the masters no more. This is Nighthawk, and I say, for myself, no more. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, because the freedom is slipping away. All right, thanks for listening while we took that short break here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. And yeah, we're going to get back to your host.
Welcome to Celebrate Truth Radio. I'm your host, Robbie Davidson. This is episode 110. It's June 5th, 2021. And I really wanted to get this guest on last week, but he had prior engagements. So really excited to have him on to talk all about what we're going to be getting into tonight. It truly is historic. If you're not familiar with what's going on with the fight for life and the amazing ruling and all this good stuff, strap in. It's going to be an exciting show because this is a person truly on the front lines, right from the very city where this all really happened. And I'm going to be learning along with you all. I've looked into it a bit and seen kind of how it's spreading, the fight that's going on, and then so much that's happening here in 2021. We're fighting on so many different fronts. We're fighting for liberty, for freedom. All of these things are coming down they're coming down on us at once. One fight in particular that I think, sometimes we kind of forget, and it's so incredibly important, is the fight for life, truly on the front lines when it comes to the entire debate of, pro-choice, pro-life. This has just become, it's truly tragic that in today's age, we have to even debate about this. The whole fact that they would take women's rights and the humanities, all these type of things that they're trying to throw in there and saying you're taking away women's rights. Okay, you're taking away their right to actually kill the unborn child in the womb. It's insane, but yet this is where society is, and this is what happens with a depraved culture that moves down, into just depravity, where all of a sudden, good is bad, bad is good. They're changing everything around, and this has been going on for a very long time. From Roe versus Wade, all these type of things that we've seen, throughout. I think it started maybe in the 70s. Hopefully, we'll get a good history lesson here on this show, because this is such an important topic when it comes for fighting for life, and truly when it comes to the unborn children. The statistics are horrific when you start factoring in how many babies are dying, even by the day, by the year. This truly is an epidemic. If you want to talk about a true epidemic, this is one. For sure, no doubt. So no stranger to Celebrate Truth Radio, his host with Through the Black with Tom, and all sorts of stuff. He's been dealing with in eschatology. I've had him on the show talking about all sorts of different issues. We even got, the last time I had him on the broadcast, we were talking about false prophets. A lot of stuff was going on there, and he's multiversed, but right now he's centered all his attention on this fight. It is a pleasure to bring on Jared Chrestman to Celebrate Truth Radio.
Hey, thanks for having me once again, Robbie. Good to be here.
Hey, man, it's awesome having you. And it's like, I think the last two times I've had you on, it's been two completely different topics. You know what I mean? Like totally different. And this is no different getting into this one. I know that you've been super busy with everything that's going on. And I was just reading some headlines just today talking about how your city of Lubbock has now become a sanctuary city, an anti-abortion city. This is absolutely incredible. This is happening.
We're not the first one, but we are special in that we're the first one to enact the Sanctuary City Ordinance, actually having a Planned Parenthood president that was practicing abortion. So, yes, there are a lot of things that make our situation unique, but people said it couldn't be done, and they said it wouldn't be upheld by the courts, and it was done, and it's been upheld by the courts. So.
Yeah, no, it's incredible, and it sounds to me like there's other cities that are getting in line to start going this direction. And to me, wow, it's incredible. It's almost tragic that it took this long, for this to happen. 2021, it seems like this fight has always been going, and it looked like, there really was no hope on the other side of the spectrum. It just seemed like Planned Parenthood and this entire movement of the right to kill unborn children was just right in our society. And if you dare question it or try to fight against it, you're a hater, and all the names that they always try to call you if you're not going along with the program.
Yeah, and it's just like, to me, it's interesting. Anytime the left uses issues like this to paint a picture that somehow those that dissent are in the minority, like they try to paint this picture that the majority of people are in favor of abortion and everybody else, they're just Neanderthals living outside of the city limits and the backwoods, and they're just behind the times. And it's just not the case. I mean, the last time I looked, at least, in the United States, and I'm not really sure about the abortion laws in Canada. You guys don't have a Planned Parenthood presence in Canada, do you?
Not like a Planned Parenthood, but we pretty much are, right across the board, pretty much the same way that America would be. It's just not under Planned Parenthood, but we do have the
I didn't know
system.
If they had I didn't know if the organization itself had a foothold in Canada. But
no, Planned Parenthood's not here.
In the United States, I mean, the last time I looked at the numbers of clinics that were available, not quite half, but closing in on half of their locations have been shut down since 2012. So, it's when you look at just the raw statistics of how hard Planned Parenthoods are fighting to stay open, they don't have the overwhelming majority of people supporting them. There are a lot of people that are in this fight. Roe v. Wade is on the ropes. There are a lot of issues with Roe v. Wade and how it's been enforced and carried out and upheld. And they're just, people have had to get clever because our national and our federal and our state governments have not done what they need to do to ban abortion. So people have had to start getting creative within state law to find out a way, instead of just nipping it in the bud at the state level, being able to maybe start dealing with it city by city. And that's the beautiful thing about the Sanctuary City Ordinances, is that city councils are now no longer relying on our state representatives or our federal representatives. They're taking matters into their own hands. being good stewards with the city that they're tasked with managing, and they're stopping it where they can stop it. And that's really, it's a grassroots movement. It's picking up steam. And, we'll go through the story in a second, but the big picture is establishing a new precedent that will essentially come at the issue of abortion from a more strategic grassroots level, from what I understand. And I'm certainly not the foremost expert in the legalities of the sanctuary city ordinance, but I have had the privilege of meeting the people here in my city that were at the forefront and being on the front lines the entire time. So it has been a very enlightening experience for me.
I'm sure. Yeah. And I'd love to hear exactly how you even just became to be on the front lines of such an important issue, especially centering around with Lubbock, Texas, and everything that was happening there. I want to ask real quick, though, when it comes to the topic abortion, do you believe that there's a very dark, sinister spiritual nature to just the procedure in and of itself?
Yeah, I do. And I personally think, coming from a background of Reformed theology and looking at things through a little bit of a different lens than most of our secular contemporaries, I think that abortion itself is a judgment. I think it's a judgment levied by God on a people where he allows those whose hearts he's hardened to kill the blessing that he's given them. He allows that to happen. Abortion in my opinion is not something that just leads to a judgment. It is a type of judgment that you see God levies on a people. And so one thing that I do take comfort in is I don't see Christian families killing their children, right? You see mostly godless degenerates murdering their children on this altar of narcissism. And yes, that's about as spiritually dark as it can be.
Yeah.
And I think that at the moment it's allowed because God is judging those. It is a judgment, and he's allowing them to heap wrath upon themselves. It's not something God will suffer forever, but it is something that he's allowing for a short period of time. And we do everything that we can to combat it, to save as many children along the way. I don't want to take away from God's sovereignty or his providence in this, but Christians are to stand as a light in a culture against this. But God is judging at the moment, and he's allowing his enemies to murder their children, just like he has in the past. That's something that tends to come and go in history.
Yeah, I was about to say that. I mean, there's a lot of evidence supporting that if you look back in history, I mean, it seems that child sacrifice was a very common theme with many, many cultures. You kind of see this, and that's why I was asking, do you see this as a spiritual aspect to it? Because in my research, and I'm not saying all times that this is the case, but overall, just the idea of, it seems very, very warped and very, very sad that a society would be elevating this to a degree where they would fight for the right to murder babies.
Well, and it's on. I mean, this is a little bit off topic, but it ties into the same overarching subject. But it's one of the reasons why our government goes after Christian children in homeschooling, because when you look at the number of children that have been murdered in this country, preborn children, you're looking at over 60 million. That's on record, right? Over 60 million, and no telling, what the numbers actually are off the books. And you add the occult stuff in the middle of it, who knows? But at the end of the day, I mean, usually in the past, it's been left up to the parents to educate their children according to their own set of morals and values and ideologies. And when you have a perpetually godless culture that continues to wipe out its own offspring, there's nothing to educate, right? And you have to go for the Christian children. You have to go for the actual family, the people that actually have children. And so it's interesting that the more abortion you see, the tighter our government tries to slap the reins and control the minds of those that are left. And that's one of the reasons why at the moment, as degenerate as our public education system has become, you have a much larger homeschooling movement right now. People are refusing to hand the little minds that God has blessed us with over to the same people that think it's okay to murder them. It just, so that's, in scripture, one of the ways that God would judge a nation is he would take away their offspring. And that means you didn't have offspring to carry on the ideology, to carry on the nation state. Sometimes he would give children to the Israelites and take away the ability to have children from others or wipe them out. And, I'm very optimistic as a especially in the eschatology that I come from, that honestly what we're seeing is God building up a Christian culture, hopefully for the future, and giving us children to educate, at the same time not allowing those that are just absolutely die in the wool enemies of all things Christ to perpetuate those ideologies. So it's, to me, it's strategic warfare on a spiritual level that I don't fully understand. But I know for me, I'm going to educate my child, train them up, give them a biblical worldview, and I'll let God judge as he sees fit. So.
Have you personally watched any like Silent Cry or any documentaries around abortion where they actually show the procedures? It's really tough to watch, but I think it's important for people to see, documentaries or just what really happens. Because I think a lot of people don't really, they won't think about it or they choose to ignore it, but they don't really know the reality on how vicious and horrible abortions are. And we're talking about pretty much all methods. You're talking about just dismembering. You're talking about just disgusting, almost medieval type processes.
You're literally disemboweling, dismembering, and decapitating a human child.
It's unbelievable. Like, it is absolutely unbelievable. I knew it was bad, but when I started watching, some documentaries, and they were some Christian documentaries, but they were really showing just how important this was. But getting graphic and showing it, I think, I don't think many people could actually see that without having, sympathy or empathy at all. And there's a lot of people that choose not to see it, or they won't watch it because they don't want to see the reality of how bad it truly is.
Once you see what it is they're actually doing, one of the tools, the only tool that they really have in their arsenals to convince you somehow that you hear a lot of the pro-choice arguments refer to the baby in the womb as a fetus. Mm-hmm. You guys are just out to protect a fetus, and fetus is just Latin for baby, essentially.
I know.
It's just Latin for baby. So, one thing I like about, there's a man out there
Young
named
life,
Jeff Durbin.
isn't it? Isn't it young life in Greek?
Yeah, or
Latin?
offspring. Yeah, the Latin, it's more like just offspring, but the way the language, you could just say fetus is Latin for baby. It's synonymous. Yeah. So, but there's a man out there. His name is Jeff Durbin. He started an organization called End Abortion Now. You can find a lot of his videos over on his YouTube channel at apologiaradio.com or Apologia Church. I don't remember exactly what the YouTube channel is, but you'll find Jeff Durbin's videos on his YouTube channel. And that's something that as I watch his videos, I see frequently is people just want to refer to this baby in the womb as a fetus. And he always holds them to the fire that this is a human child. It's just a baby. Yeah. It's not, he'll always say something to the effect of, we don't have to speak Latin. We're speak English. We're English speakers. Let's call it a baby. And you'll find that when people do see the reality of what an abortion actually is, the dismembering of the little arms and the legs and disemboweling and actually pulling the head from the body with forceps. When they pull all of the parts of this baby out of the womb, they have to lay them on the table, piece them back together to make sure that they got all the pieces. And there are horror stories, Robbie, of botched abortions or women in the middle of this that realize that this is a baby. So frequently they're told it's not a baby that sometimes they lie to themselves, convincing themselves that that's true. Although I would have to say I'm far less agreeable or sympathetic to women that go into an abortion clinic, because there is a certain base level of understanding that there is a life in their womb that they are intentionally destroying. And so I am actually one of those that supports abortion being charged as murder. And all those involved in the decision to murder that child should be held accountable for murder, and justice should be executed appropriately with the appropriate punishments. It is murder. It is, you're literally tearing a baby limb from limb in an early stage of development or not. It does not take away from its humanity. It is
it's a life. It's a life. They'll say fetus all the time, but a fetus is a life. Even a doctor will admit to that, right? So let's forget semantics here. A life is a life.
It is a life. It's they use the stages of development, and certainly there are better people to articulate the apologetics of this subject. But what I see more often than not and I have lots of personal conversations with people that are pro-choice, and I've been outside the abortion clinics, and I've gotten into plenty of arguments and fights on the street, especially as we were going through this last deal, trying to pass this ordinance. But there seems to be this general concept that a person that is not able to take care of themselves is not, referring to the baby. It can't take care of itself, therefore, the mom has the right to choose. Well, that you apply that logic to those in the hospital or on respirators or ventilators. Right. You've moved into this ethics where you're saying it's okay to kill anybody that can't take care of themselves. Or the other, some of the more popular arguments are, well, these parents can't afford these children, they'll have a low quality of life. And so you follow their argument to its logical conclusion. They're advocating to kill the poor kids, right? Yeah. If they say it's not a person until it's born, then you're saying that the location of the person is what gives it its humanity. And and to that you would say I'm no more a human when I'm in my car than when I'm outside my car. What is it that makes a baby a human when it's 8 inches, when it travels 8 inches through the birth canal, but it's not a human when it's inside the mind? This is every aspect of the cells in that baby are human cells. It's just a human in an early stage of development. Yeah. It's a human nonetheless.
It's insane that this is even a debate. It really, truly is. And it just shows you what they can do with like words and just over, generations going and teaching this garbage. Where it's like, and you're right, when you were talking about, women, there isn't a woman out there that have had an abortion that doesn't feel it. Again, they don't talk about all the after effects, the depression, things that happen with women. There's just a horrific amount of research there. But again, they don't show you that at Planned Parenthood. They don't want you to know these facts. And really this whole debate, people say, well, what about rape? What about rape? Well, why if you have a rapist, why are you going to go murder his children? It makes no sense, right? The whole idea is there's adoption, right? There's so many people, so many loving parents out there that would like to adopt children, and this whole nonsense like, oh, well, I have to, and then you'll hear this, well, I'd have to carry it. It would be a reminder to me. You know what I mean? So everyone will go into the whole thing about, instantly, this as well as I do, because I've had this debate before. They instantly move towards rape and incest. Yeah. These worst, crazy scenarios. Or they'll say, what happens if it's the mother or the child? It's an either or situation, Jared. It's either or. Who has to go? Someone's going to die. They'll always go to these. And again, they account for, I forget, it is ridiculous low amount, probabilities that these things actually occur. But yet they'll bring these things all the time and say, you're heartless and you're not a woman, especially if you're a man talking about this, you'll get that as well too. How dare you? You're not a woman.
I like to flip that argument on its head with people, because we only end up arguing about the death of the innocent child. And I ask what they think should happen to the rapist. I believe the rapist should be put to death. The Bible certainly thinks so. That was the punishment for rape. Yeah. It was death. They were executed if they were found guilty. And I advocate for that. Yes, the baby that exists because of the rape is the act of rape was a tragic thing, but when they call us heartless for not allowing the execution of the child, I ask them where real justice is in the fact that they're not advocating for the death of the rapist. Yeah, and most of the time, they don't have a lot of these people that say, well, I don't think I don't think the rapist deserves to die. It's like, okay, you'd rather kill the innocent child in the womb who played no part. So really, who is the heartless, callous, and who's really standing on principles of justice, sound biblical justice, and who's not? Oftentimes, if you can start to expose the folly of the arguments, you can change the course of the conversation. And that really is something that not many people talk about. I am all for the death of the rapist. I am not for the death of the innocent child that exists as a result.
Well, yeah, I don't think any type of ethics or any type of judicial system should have a type of policy where, well, yep, that's right, we're going to now start punishing the children or the babies of the evildoers. You know what I mean? Of the lawbreakers. Yeah. I mean, it makes no sense whatsoever. And yet this is what's justified. And I understand it's a horrific ordeal, but, there are loving people out there that would gladly adopt. And it's like, does that child not have a right to have a life? They'll say, like you mentioned before, well, what if they're poor and they don't have a good, there's a lot of really happy poor people out there. To tell you the truth, sometimes the poor are actually better off than the rich. The rich are miserable, right? They're depressed and they're taking medication all the time. So the whole idea is like there's a lot of people that were raised in poverty that led functioning adult lives. And if they could go back and saying, would I do it over? Of course they would, right? It's just, to me, it just doesn't make any sense where someone is just so blinded or so calloused that they're having this argument saying there's any good reason. And again, they don't say baby. You're right. They say fetus. But make no mistake about it. It's a life. They know that. They understand that. They just try to justify it because they feel that they're infringing on their freedoms and they don't want their freedoms being taken away. Maybe you can comment on that.
If they don't go for the fetus argument, they go immediately to the clump of cells argument, which my response is usually something to the effect of, if they say, well, it's just a clump of cells, I'm like, well, it's a clump of human cells, and so are you. You're just a more developed clump of human cells. Yeah. We're all clumps of human cells. That's what we are. Our bodies are comprised of trillions of cells. These are just a clump of cells in an early stage of development. It's human nonetheless, and it deserves to have a right to life.
Yeah, well, I mean, and we'll get right into this because I definitely want to hear, the whole story, how you became, positioned right on the front lines of such a, like I said, historic, because, I mean, it's still in the news. I mean, just typing it in today, it's still going, right? There's still people talking. There's people fuming about it. Obviously, the ACLU is up in arms, and Planned Parenthood, I guess, is suing. I don't know if they've already lost that one, but I don't know if they're countersuing or trying it again. But there's so much to discuss here. But to me, when I first heard about this, I was like, this absolutely is incredible. Like, I honestly didn't even think it would even be possible, just the state of society and where things are at. It was like, oh, I don't know if this is even possible anymore. And it seems to be that it's not only possible, it's spreading to a point where, there's going to be, probably many sanctuary cities for the babies, right? For, and they're the most vulnerable. And my whole idea behind this is who are going to stand up for the most vulnerable of society. And it's the unborn. I mean, these are the most vulnerable, and they're sitting there. People need to stand up and defend them. It's not even about getting into politics or getting into an argument. This truly is a fight for life. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so, we don't have a break coming up, do we? Do I got time to jump
You got
into
tons of time. You got like a half hour, only a top of the hour break. Yeah, we only got a break once.
Well, so for those that have followed some of the stuff that I've done with Tom on Through the Black, I've spent a lot of time looking at conspiracy stuff and occult stuff and satanic ritual abuse and, the topics that come along with it, including child sacrifice. We've never shied away from the darkest subject matter, right? That's kind of what we were known for, just two guys that tackled a lot of crazy subjects. And we did a lot of field work, a lot of groundwork, working with people in the occult, working with people with DID. And one of the common themes was ritual sacrifice. It was always being discussed and talked about. And people, that you would meet people along the way that were involved in chasing child sex trafficking. And so I was very much attuned to this world that existed. Even though I wasn't always able to get my eyeballs on it, you were running in circles where you heard lots of rumors of babies being murdered in secret, right? And cults and covens and all kinds of stuff. But, I had spent a lot of time in that world. And it dawned on me one day that as it can be very difficult. Let me put it this way. It can be very difficult to track down the validity of some of those rumors sometimes, right? It can be very difficult. So you can spend a whole lot of time and come up with absolutely nothing, right? Mm-hmm. And I believe these things take place, but it's not always easy to prove it, right? Definitively and in a way that's meaningful. Yeah. And it dawned on me one day as I had not had to deal with a Planned Parenthood anywhere near me. There just wasn't one in Lubbock. There was a rumor that one might be coming. When I found out for sure that Planned Parenthood had purchased a building, had been given $10 million of private funding from a local donor, and was currently moving to acquire their abortion license. You have to have a license to actually practice abortion, and that takes time to get. They'd filed all the appropriate paperwork. They're obviously masters at getting the license. Yeah. I realized, I was like, this is something I need to now put all of my time and effort into. Because this thing that I've had a problem with, child sacrifice, for so long, and the concept of it and chasing rumors, it's not even a secret at Planned Parenthood.
Yeah.
You know, it's just happening. It's just happening in the middle of town, and everybody ignores that. It blows my mind that so many people look at the idea of child sacrifice as something that's just completely taboo to talk about, or just an insane topic that in no way can be true. And I think in many cases, like, why would there have to be a secret movement of, you know, destroying children for occult purposes? Like, why would that have to stay so hidden when we could just do it in our backyard? You know, and obviously I'm not taking away from the validity of some of that being true, but what I mean is there are plenty of babies being murdered and it's not even a secret.
Yeah.
And so many people will get so active chasing the conspiracies that they fail to take care of.
I think those are more around the ritual, though, you know, around the actual ritual itself. So obviously that stuff just couldn't be done in a Planned Parenthood, but I understand what your point is.
Yeah, exactly. And you'll find, I mean, it's you know, I think that there have been plenty of conversational pieces and private interviews and stuff. There are certain people that are attracted to working at a Planned Parenthood just because of the nature of the business. But anyway, yeah, you understand what I'm saying. I'm not taking away from the validity of SRA, but so there, I think it's possible, because, you know, just because I've lived the life, to get so consumed with chasing the shadowy aspects of the world that we fail to adequately take care of what's happening in our backyard so publicly. And so I decided that it was time to step away, at least for a while, and do everything that I could in the fight in Lubbock to help prevent it from becoming Planned Parenthood from becoming a fully functional abortion facility in Lubbock. And so that's what I did. I just kind of stepped away, went as played the game as hard as I could. So essentially what had happened was, and I don't know the entire history behind the ordinance itself. There's a guy named Mark Dixon or Dickinson. I can't remember what it's something to that effect. Mark Dixon. I think it's Mark Dixon. He somehow had generated this ordinance that cities could adopt, right? And the idea, I don't know how many people were involved in writing the ordinance legislation. I don't know the whole history of where it came from, but I know he was involved. I actually met him when he was here. I didn't have a chance to talk to him, but we shook hands. Essentially what had happened was legislation for an ordinance that would ban abortion was created that cities could adopt. And the idea was that this ordinance could be voted on by the local city council and made law in that city. So representatives in different cities approached their city councils and they said, please vote on this ordinance and make it law inside the city limits. And so there were cities that did not have Planned Parenthoods or or even abortion facilities that decided what they would do is they would go ahead and pass the ordinance anyway, just as part of the process of creating a new precedent, a new legal precedent whereby they were supporting the ban on abortion. And I think at the time that Lubbock took it to vote with our city council, there were 20 something cities that had already passed it, but those cities didn't, like I said, they didn't have abortion facilities. So it was pretty much symbolic in nature only, right? Well, there's a man here named Jim Baxa who is very locally politically savvy. He's very involved in you know, city government and, you know, school boards. He's paying attention. He's a very unique mind when it comes to paying attention to local laws, right? Local city government and issues pertaining to local government. He somehow got involved and approached the city council, I think with several other people. I don't remember. I actually have an interview. If you go to my YouTube channel, Jared 2.0, I have a full-length interview with Jim about his role and what took place with this ordinance, so you could get more information on that. But essentially what happened was the city council from the start, even in private conversations, according to Jim, wanted nothing to do with this ordinance. So they knew that they had an uphill fight if we wanted to pass it. Enough people were able to band together to force the city council to a vote on the ordinance, and our city council unanimously voted no. They did not want to make Lubbock a sanctuary city. So the citizens said, okay, well, you've clearly played your hands as to how you feel about Planned Parenthood. Keep in mind, Planned Parenthood they have a building at this time. They're in the process of fixing it up, remodeling it. They've applied for an abortion license. If our city council had done their job, not a single child would have been murdered in the facility here in Lubbock. But because they failed to uphold justice, because they failed to stand for the lives of the preborn, right? City council, prior to the citizens taking it to a public vote, right, at the polls, we actually had a poll vote. We actually got a petition signed with enough people, took the ordinance to the people for a special vote, which is just not something that happens in cities our size very often, right? Our Planned Parenthood actually 2 weeks before the vote had a fully functioning abortion facility. They were actually practicing both surgical and chemical abortions outside the facility. So as far as I know, the vote was moved up very quickly. The petition had been signed in the process. Enough people signed the petition that the city council was overruled, in the sense that now we were going to have the polls brought to the polling locations. People would be able to turn out for early voting. It was like a couple week long process. There were 10 days of early voting, followed by one big voting day on a Saturday. So there was an organization in Lubbock that was started by 5 grandmothers that wanted to do everything they could to put together a pool of resources that could combat the Planned Parenthood propaganda machine. So there were quite a few organizations here that were at work, but the one that I teamed up with and just became a simple volunteer in was called Project Destiny. And what Project Destiny did was they decided that their entire goal would be to rally every church in Lubbock to get all of the Christians and the conservative population to turn out to vote. So as with any vote, right, the basic strategy is to get more of our people to vote than their people. And that's exactly what it was. They knew that if we did not rally the church population, then we would lose this vote. And so in Project Destiny, there were probably 50 or so volunteers that all took the churches they belonged to and churches on the list that nobody was representing in the volunteer organization, where we would take prepackaged resources that were available to them to spread the word, to help raise awareness in these churches about the vote coming up. And that was the primary problem that we had, was the vote. But from the time that the city council voted the ordinance down to the time that the petition was signed and we were going to get an official vote in Lubbock, it was only a couple months. And you didn't have a ton of people advertising it. So the biggest hurdle that had to be jumped with this election was letting people know the vote was actually happening. Most of Lubbock had no idea this was actually taking place. And we knew that if we could let people know this was taking place, there were enough people that stood against abortion in principle that they would turn up to vote, but we had to find a way to let them know. So Planned Parenthood, at the end of the day, with all like this, I've several different numbers have been announced over the last few months, but the final numbers, Planned Parenthood had something like $400 and something thousand for its propaganda machine to try to convince people to vote against the ordinance for one reason or another. They said we would be depriving women of health care. It was going to ruin. It was a waste of tax dollars. It would hurt your taxes in Lubbock if they weren't able to practice abortion. It was all this different nonsense that they were putting out there. Mm-hmm. Project Destiny was able to come up with about $120,000. Project Destiny printed up, hundreds of signs, 4 foot by 4 foot signs for the roadways, resources, videos, things that could be shared during church services, flyers, Facebook posts, Instagram posts, hashtags. They put together what they could, and churches left and right would just let somebody at Project Destiny know that they wanted some of those resources, and they had a team, mostly Jim Baxa and a few others, that would show up and they would install these signs all over Lubbock wherever they requested, totally free of charge, right? Mm-hmm. So Project Destiny used every ounce of their money to just produce resources that would help raise awareness for the votes and assist churches in getting the word out. And that's exactly what happened. And so in the process, and this is part of my own personal story, right? I came into this after City Council had voted the ordinance down. And I did not realize that these things were happening. I was one of the clueless people that as soon as I realized this was going to happen, I knew I had to do everything I could to help. So I reached out to a lady that had sent a mass email out. She put me on a list. I started showing up to some meetings. And I volunteered to go to my church as the Project Destiny representative, a church called Redeemer on 66th and Elgin here in Lubbock, Texas. And I was going to start talking to the elders and the pastor and hopefully get our church, which has a large college representation, is a very large college ministry. It has 4 different services, a couple to 2,000 to 3,000 people, at its height were showing up prior to COVID, I think, regularly on Sundays. It's not a small church, right? It's not a small church by any standard. And I actually approached the leadership and said, hey, I'm volunteering for Project Destiny. There's a sanctuary city vote coming up. I would love to get you information so you can start letting our church know that the vote is happening. We have to rally the church to vote. And I was met with opposition. I had to jump through some hoops. I was able to get a meeting with an elder after talking to the pastor kind of in passing outside in the foyer. I was able to get a meeting with an elder. People were calling, people from different places, not even representing any of these organizations. They were calling the church, wanting them to let people in the church know about the vote. I actually got an official meeting with an elder. I was able to force the conversation into an elders meeting where they discussed it, and they all pretty much decided, all the elders of my church, that they were not going to have anything to do with anything political, right? They decided that they were a gospel-only church, which is insane to me, Robbie, because the gospel is predicated on the lordship of Jesus Christ, and murdering innocent children is something that, Christ has commanded us not to do. Like this is, you can't separate the issue. The issue of abortion cannot be separated from the gospel. So do
you think that some of the churches are just scared because of the was it the 401(c) status that they can't get political? Like, from my understanding is there's like a line that you can't really cross being too political. Do you think that has something to do with it, or not really?
A lot of people say that, right? A lot of people say that. But in the United States, even though there are those stipulations with tax exempt status, right? The 501(c)(3), the government is not able to enforce that. Like, it's one of those things. It's like, no matter how much the government wants to come in and control the speech of pastors, there's just simply is no way for them to enforce that, right? So,
correct. But do you think there's a reason why churches have been so quiet when it comes to, say, let's just say presidential? It's pretty taboo, from my understanding, to be endorsing any political figure inside church. And I think 501(c) had a lot to do with it. Again, that's just my theory. I mean, I don't know if there's much validity to it.
I'm not going to say that's not the case for some churches, but in Texas, locally,
Texas,
I'm not speaking for the church as a whole. No, that's not the case.
Yeah,
like that's
true.
not the problem.
Cool.
Right?
Cool.
You've got. I mean, we have more gun-toting, Bible-believing Christians that run around our churches. We are not concerned that Uncle Sam is going to show up because we're talking about Donald Trump on Sunday morning.
True.
That's just not.
Yeah.
That's not something that we're worried about.
Yeah, that's true. I got to keep in
all.
context. We're talking about Texas here. That's right. Let's keep this in context.
Right.
This is Texas we're talking about. Yeah.
So when you deal with the issue of abortion, where you got to understand too, and this is probably a whole nother show in and of itself, we're also dealing with churches that are becoming more theologically liberal on the issue of abortion and things like critical race theory.
Correct.
So the problem with most of our churches today is not an issue with the technicalities of a 501(c)(3. It's the fact that they've become theologically liberal. They actually don't believe their Bible. They are taking the liberal stance, the theologically liberal stance on abortion, the theologically liberal stance on critical race theory. It has everything to do with their personal politics, not the way they view government overreach into the pulpit.
I hear you. That makes sense. That makes sense, because there's a lot more churches that are moving that direction. And again, another show, critical race theory. I mean, I heard someone say the other day, if you hear your church even bringing that up, run, or really put the red flags up, because these things are to destroy, the church, just as the liberal, ideologies have been just flooding into the churches. And you're right, that probably has something to do with it. It's like, this is an iffy situation. We don't want to be known, we don't want to polarize people. It's almost like we don't want to be divisive. You've heard that one before, right? We don't want to be too divisive.
Yes, our churches, they don't have backbones. They don't have backbones.
Correct.
And so to put this in perspective, mine had been adopting and preaching certain aspects very subtly of relating to critical race theory. So many people at my church had begun becoming very hyper acute to the fact that liberalism was creeping in theologically.
Marxism. So I would go so far as say Marxism has been creeping in.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. And, with COVID, they used some of the COVID stuff as an excuse. They were one of the strictest churches in our city with the way they implemented mask mandates for worship services and stuff, when our governor never mandated masks for church services. So, they were very quick. At every step of the way, my church was making the wrong decisions. Okay.
Yeah.
And you have to pick your battles.
Sure.
I was for the last year and a half, 2 years, I was already becoming a little iffy about my presence there, but at the same time, you don't want to be too rash. You have to play these things intelligently, and
you don't want to leave though too. A lot of times, I think I just said that. I said you got to run if you hear about critical race theory. But the reality is, if some things like that are happening in your church and you have that feeling, unless you're literally called to leave, you got to be there. You've got to be there to warn people. And so I always urge people unless you feel called to leave, stay. If you leave, then what? Right? It's going to go all downhill. So at least as long as your voice is present and you can bring these to, people's attention, saying, look, man, let's research this a bit. And you, of all people, just, with all the vast knowledge you have and just the research you've done, you'd be a huge asset in helping a church fall off the edge.
Well, and I had, I had a lot of personal connections there, friendships, and that was there was a lot of private conversation over a year and a half, especially in small groups and stuff. And I found that most of my close friendships, we became of like mind. I was able to give my 2 cents. We were able to analyze some of the decisions of the church, look at what the Bible had to say about the topic. And it was a fruitful period of time. But ultimately, back to the main story, the issue of abortion is definitely, it was a line that it was sort of the last straw, right? The point of no return for me. How the church handled this issue during this ordinance was going to dramatically affect my relationship with the church and if I chose to stay there. But I decided it would be this would be the hill that I died on at the moment, right? I decided that this is going to be the hill that I die on. I'm representing this volunteer organization. They've asked me to be the representative to this church. I'll do everything I can to, deal with the leadership of the church, hopefully push them in the right direction. And if they don't want anything to do with it, I will revoke my membership when this is over. And that's exactly what happened. But here's how that happened. So when the church leadership met officially and discussed this, they created a list of bullet points as to why they would not not saying they wouldn't. They didn't say they wouldn't support the ordinance, but they would not become active and raise awareness in any capacity. There would be no education from the church to the people about the vote, right? Mm-hmm. And there were a lot of churches that stepped up to the plate, Robbie. We had a lot of good churches in town that stepped up to the plate. Mine, unfortunately, was not one of them. So I was pretty much told that I would not be. All I said was I'd like a table in the lobby, which happens frequently, where I could give out flyers to people that want to know, just to let them know the vote's happening.
Sure.
I can provide you with professional slides and videos, which churches play all the time, that this ordinance is up for a vote. We had stories, dude. There were professional videos done of micro interviews, right, with children that were products of rape. Children that were poor, people that had abortions that, repented, people that almost had abortions and didn't. Now their kids are doctors or whatever, all the normal videos you have to show that there's not a single case of abortion that's justified. All of those things were professionally done and made available, so the church didn't have to do any work. They would not play or use. They wouldn't even put up a single slide, man, to the people to let them know the vote was coming. They would not let us have access to anybody, and neither would they open their mouths to tell people. So I sat back and I was not okay with this.
Yeah.
I was not okay with this, right? But I can't, the show we did before, the last one we did, the issue of tyranny and, judgment and things like that you and I talked about.
Yeah.
The issue of, I'd been spending a lot of time looking at the Protestant theory of resistance. And so I asked myself, how could I rebel against my church's decision biblically while not overstepping my boundaries and violating their private property rights?
Yes.
There were churches in town that offered me armies of people to flag the vehicles in the parking lot with flyers. I quickly decided that's illegal. That would be crossing a line. There are other ways to do this more intelligently. So, long story short, what I decided to do is there's only two main roads to get to my church, right? It's nestled in a corner, and there are only two roads to get to its parking lot. And there are four waves. There are four church services, so there are four waves of traffic. So what I did was I reached out to Project Destiny and I asked for really big signs. Give me really big signs, right? Give me the big signs that you guys are putting on the highways. Mm-hmm. I'll put together a team of people. We'll hang out on the corner and we will hold these signs and we will target every single one of the cars that are headed to and from our church that gets stuck at this intersection because it's a fairly long road, but it's the only road, right?
Yeah.
So these people, they just sit in their cars at these intersections in massive waves, right, in between services. And several other people thought it was a great idea. Project Destiny thought it was a great idea. We're way off church property. We're a quarter mile from church property. So we're completely within our rights, right, as far as the city's concerned. And we targeted traffic to and from the church. And we did that 2 Sundays in a row. And we hit every single wave of traffic, right? And we were able to raise a significant amount of awareness with our church, despite our leadership failure in doing it, in an appropriate fashion. And so, one of the things that Paul Stell, one of the men he was pretty much in charge of the Project Destiny movement. He knew we were out there. He drove by one day. He's like a real estate developer in this part of the world, a very intelligent and passionate man, right? He's very passionate about the pro-life issue. He put more time and energy into making this happen, and God bless him for it. I mean, one of the reasons why this happened is because of guys like Paul Stell, right? Paul Stell was driving by one day. He saw us holding our signs on the corner. He knew the story of what I was dealing with my church. He was very dissatisfied. He knew some of the leadership there. He was pretty much getting blocked as well in his attempts to communicate. Paul was driving by, and he saw us on that last Sunday. He saw us holding those signs, and it gave him an idea. At least this is what he said to me. This I remember in a phone call. He called me and he said, "Man, I think we should do that on corners all over Lubbock, right? I think we should do this everywhere on voting day." And I was like, "Yeah, dude, I'm all for it." So, there's some lessons, some do's and don'ts that you kind of learn with doing sidewalk, protesting and intersection protesting. And so he called me and we kind of set up a list of do's and don'ts, and he came up with a really kind of quick training email, and he put together groups of people to stand at 19 major intersections all over Lubbock all day on the main date of voting. So we were able to rally people to the early vote. And then the Saturday of the main vote, we had people, and I mean tons of people, hundreds of people all over Lubbock standing on the corners of major intersections, raising awareness about the vote. People were rolling their windows down, asking, where can we vote? We didn't know this was happening. Paul had given every single person at these intersections a list of all the voting locations. So we were ready to tell people where the closest location was to that intersection on the spot, so it was beautiful. It was beautiful strategy, Robbie. It was beautiful strategy. And we sat all day long, man. We just sat out in the sun and cooked. And we talked to so many people at the intersections, raised awareness. There were kids dressing in costumes, waving signs like it was a car wash. I mean, just getting attention. And at the end of the day, the vote passed. We won 62 to 38, right, %. So there was pretty much an overwhelming majority that voted in favor of the ordinance, which essentially banned abortion. Planned Parenthood said that if the ordinance carried, that they would go ahead and honor it. They were practicing abortions. The ordinance was going to go into effect on June 1st, which it has gone into effect, and it has worked. And essentially what the ordinance does, right, is that it allows the city, if Planned Parenthood performed an abortion after this ordinance was implemented, the city could fine them up to $2,000. Now, that's not great. That's obviously not justice for murder, right? You killed somebody, you killed an innocent child, you owe $2,000 in a fine. That's not justice. But that's not what it was about the ordinance. That's what everybody keeps harping on. People that are critical of the ordinance say that that's not actually going to do anything to stop abortions. Well, that's not the important aspect of the ordinance. The ordinance opened Planned Parenthood up to lawsuits with any immediate family member of a person that received an abortion. Mm-hmm. So if you were the immediate family member of a person that just received an abortion, regardless if the person that received the abortion wanted you to or not, you had a legal right now to sue Planned Parenthood for wrongful death. And here's something that happened. Lawyers were stepping up left and right to sue Planned Parenthood for free, chomping at the bit to sue for wrongful death, right? So Planned Parenthood, because our city obviously was not on our side, nobody really thought that our city was going to be the ace in the hole that would be levying these fines. But word was starting to spread that, hey, if you have a daughter that gets an abortion and you don't agree with it, I'll sue them for free. Come to me, man. We'll sue their pants off. Planned Parenthood, and you could have individual lawsuits. You could have 8 immediate family members throw 8 different lawsuits at a Planned Parenthood.
So how does that work, though? Like, just I'm trying to think of that logistically, and I'm just thinking, like, okay, so someone goes to an abortion, but someone of the family can just sue Planned Parenthood for performing that abortion?
Wrongful death, because yes. So, like, Roe v. Wade is not a federal law, right? It was a ruling by the court. Courts do not make law, right? Our federal government has to make laws. Our Congress and our Senate has a system of due process by which laws are made. Roe v. Wade was not a Senate or congressional thing. It's not an actual law. It was something that was upheld. It's really one of the biggest pieces of fraud ever in this country. People hold it like it's law. It's not law. It's actually unconstitutional because Roe v. Wade is predicated on the idea of potential life, but we know biologically and scientifically that it is a human life. The embryo is a human life in an early stage of development. Roe v. Wade did not take that into account. Roe v. Wade is on the ropes, in my opinion. There are a lot more attacks that are coming for Roe v. Wade in the near future, where
I hope it gets overturned. I really do hope that it gets overturned.
Now, there are guys close to me that say that they don't believe it will be overturned, and for various reasons, but I think that Roe v. Wade has more pressure on it than ever. I'm not smart enough to really understand all the nuances.
The main reason why you, Jared, believe that it's on the ropes is why?
Because there's a new precedent being established. So there's a massive energy pushing back strategically in new ways. And like, just for instance, like this new sanctuary city ordinance that's popping up all over the place, it's one of those things that is working to establish a new legal precedent. And so when courts are ruling, they look to legal precedents, not necessarily ethics, right? They look to the state of what is, not necessarily the state of what should be, right? So that's the difference between morality and ethics. We largely live in a statistically moral culture that creates its value set based on how many people believe this is a good thing, right? So you can call that statistical morality. If 60% of people think that this particular action is a good thing, well, then by majority vote, it's a good thing, rather than looking to should we think of it as a good thing or not. So that's the difference between ethics and morality. Morality looks to the state of what is. Ethics really looks to the state of what should be. And I don't think you can separate it. Morality always has an inherent ethical system. So my morality is derived from biblical ethic, right? So you have
Hold that thought, Jared. We're gonna go to a quick break, and we'll be right back after these messages. Don't go anywhere. You're listening to Celebrate Truth Radio with my special guest, Jared Chrestman. This is episode 110. We'll be right back. Don't go anywhere.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Be evasive, but that doesn't mean that they're telling the truth as opposed to fiction.
And in Genesis chapter 6, verse 4, There were giants in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came and also the daughters of men, indicating that there were giants before the Nephilim.
And sons of God, plural. They weren't talking about Jesus coming down.
No, that's right. Yeah.
I'm Steve Crawford, host of Factor Theory Live. Join me every Sunday night from 10 p.m. till midnight Eastern Standard Time on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. Check it out.
Transcending time and space, let us take you to the place inside your mind where thoughts divide and mysteries unwind. Join us every Monday evening right here on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time. And you will catch the Fenton Perspective with our great host, Lorian Fenton. Come listen in as she shares her amazing stories from the past to present, along with all of her guest secrets to the future. That's the Fenton Perspective every Monday evening right here from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time, only on Revolution Radio. Oh, and you don't need to expect us. We're already here.
Galactic Interstellar Council on Revolution Radio Studio A, Fridays at 2 p.m. Eastern. Join us as we traverse the starseed paradigm, as expressed in the time-space continuum that we know as the divine expression of love and light. Integrating this conscious unity into the galactic paradigm. So welcome all, both terrestrial beings and galactic beings as one. So be it. You're listening to Revolution Radio.
If you think for 1 second that the Capitol will ever treat us fairly, you are lying to yourselves. Because we know who they are and what they do. This is what they do, and we must fight back. You can torture us and bomb us. Fire is catching. And if we burn, you burn with us.
Good evening.
Are you awake yet? I hope. We've tried for years and years to use passive resistance and loud voices to make a change. The time is over. Your governments around the world have no other goal than to decimate your entire existence at the hands of the bankers and the elites. The war is coming, and it's your choice to decide if you want to be a warrior or a victim. Denial is not a choice anymore. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported radio station on the planet. Not giving up. Revolution Radio. All right, thanks for listening while we took that short break here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. And now we're going to get back to your host.
Welcome back to Celebrate Truth Radio. I'm your host, Robbie Davidson. My special guest this evening is Jared Chrestman. And we've been talking about the historic landmark that happened in Lubbock, Texas. Reading into it, more than, I think, 24 Texas cities have declared themselves as sanctuary cities. But Lubbock was the biggest and first to do so that actually has an abortion provider in town. Is that correct? Jared.
Yeah, exactly. It's not only were we the first to do it with a fully functioning abortion facility present and active, but we were also the first to do it by bypassing the city council and taking it to a vote. So that it's unique on two fronts.
Why are we doing that like everywhere? That's what I want to know. Why don't we just...
Everybody was watching us. That's the thing. Nobody thought. I mean, in larger cities, your city governments tend to be more liberal, right? And Lubbock is the 11th. I believe it's the 11th largest city in Texas, and it's the 84th largest city in the United States. So it's not small, right? I mean, it's like not the biggest, but it's not small.
Yeah.
And so there were a lot of eyes on Lubbock.
I've been to Lubbock. I met you for the first time, I think, in Lubbock there. So when we were doing the shooting for Scientism Exposed 2. But yeah, we stayed in Lubbock actually, I think for a day or so. So yeah, I'm very familiar with Lubbock.
Yeah. So, it's one of those, a lot of people were watching Lubbock because, even guys like Mark Harrington, who I don't know personally, but I have a lot of respect for him and Created Equal. My buddy Tom from Through the Black, his daughter is full-time at Created Equal. He was very skeptical that this would happen. In fact, he did not think it would. I listened to his radio show and heard him talk. I've been paying real close attention to everybody that has commentary on what's been happening here, because this is one of the first times in the fight for, the pro-life fight that I've seen so many things up close and met so many of the people being discussed personally that some of the criticism that I hear frequently, it's just simply that I've heard on about other things and didn't know what to think. I can tell where it's true and not true now. So I've been paying real close attention to the commentary because I know all these people. So anyway, long story short, one of the questions that you had asked me right before the break was, why do I believe that Roe v. Wade might be on the ropes? And I just think that there is I think Roe v. Wade is outdated. I think the arguments for Roe v. Wade are 40 years old, completely outdated. They're no longer relevant. You have a lot of energy, right? If you had a city like ours that was able to band together, defying our tyrannical city council and to make this a law, it shows that people are willing to step up to the plate where our government is failing.
I want to move to Lubbock.
I'm telling you, I see it as potentially a very positive thing. Now, and I'm, as in all shows, I'm as completely transparent as I can be. You can't, because I believe abortion is a judgment, I don't believe you can just stop it because you feel like it. It's just something God's going to have to bless. God blessed us in this fight. He blessed us.
Sure.
And we've been able to effectively shut Planned Parenthood down. And I think that this strategy should be taken everywhere. And I pray that God blesses it everywhere it goes and uses this as a catalyst in his providence and his sovereignty to rid abortion for good. I'm hopeful. God will not suffer this type of evil forever. He doesn't. True. It doesn't go on forever. He deals with it. But what his timing looks like, I'm not sure, but I know that he blessed us immensely here, and I just see mounting pressure moving the Roe v. Wade direction. I don't think it's going to survive forever.
The innocent blood cries out, right? So
it does.
And I mean, Israel, they were crying out when they were in captivity for 40 years before something happened. So sometimes we think it's taking forever, but it's in His perfect timing.
His perfect timing. Mm-hmm.
That's definitely true.
It's a travesty, what's happened here. Even my city council has blood on its hands. That month-long period of time, month and a half, whatever it was, where they were actively practicing abortions. I think the schedule, they did them twice a month. So there was an abortionist that had to come in from out of town to actually perform them. So they would schedule them all to be done on 2 different days a month. And there's a whole network of people here that would call to schedule abortions to get, fake abortions to get an idea of the schedule so that they could have people present that were willing to adopt children. You know how that works. So they, people could help. And I mean, dude, it was just, they had security that would, walk this guy into the building. But, when this ordinance passed, yes, the ACLU stepped up in connection with Planned Parenthood to file a lawsuit. I talked to some of the people that were in the middle of it. We had the number 2 lawyer in the state for this particular issue that was ready to do it pro bono, do it completely for free. Our mayor, in his infinite wisdom, chose to not use the best guy for the job that was also free and choose a very expensive guy of his own choosing, right, that didn't have a vested interest in this like we did. But regardless of that, that's a personal issue here. People are very frustrated with our mayor because he's not a good man. Essentially what happened was they filed a federal lawsuit. Now, this gets into the nitpicky details I don't know that everybody's going to care about, but I found it interesting, and it was explained to me by people in the middle of it that the fact that the ACLU was suing over the issue of the sanctuary city ordinance on a federal level, but about it violating state law. Okay, let me back up. They were saying that the city ordinance violated state law, so they decided to take it to the federal courts. Now, I'm not a lawyer, right? But it was explained to me that any lawyer worth his weight knows that that's a dead giveaway that they didn't have a case. Because if they're trying to sue over state law, that case should have been filed with the state. But the fact that they took a court case over state law to the federal courts indicated that they knew they didn't have a case, and this was sort of a last-ditch effort to get something done, okay? So the writing was on the wall. People that understood the system said there's no way this case actually goes to court because the very way that it's being filed proves that nobody believes it's going to work, right? So they were telling people prior to the vote that it would be a violation of the law and it would just be overturned, right? Because it was unconstitutional and it was illegal, and anybody that thinks they could enforce it, they were fools because it was just so blatantly illegal that nobody would uphold it. Well, it went to the courts, and the courts said, no, this is completely compliant with state law. It's not only legal, but it's enforceable, right? So the federal courts actually upheld, from what I understand. They've upheld it. They dismissed the case. It didn't even go to court. They dismissed it outright. So the ACLU is standing there. They're holding the bag out in the rain, right, with no place to go. We've had people try to schedule abortions up there at the Planned Parenthood, and there are no abortions being scheduled. They're actually referring people to other locations like Dallas, Houston, up Colorado, one place in New Mexico. They're telling people they're going to have to travel. And it's only a matter of time before they're completely unable to sustain themselves and they shut down. In fact, here they're still looking for pretty much all new staff, and no one knows why. They've put ads in the paper to restaff the building. They don't have anybody working there at the moment, it really seems. There are cars that pull up out back. You have people coming in and out, but they don't seem to have many of the positions that would be required filled. One of the arguments people make about Planned Parenthood, this is something that's happening right now because it's incredibly relevant, is that they also provide all these other services to women. And so to close down a Planned Parenthood is actually a detriment to women in the lower end of the socioeconomic spectrum, right? That they're just not going to be able to get good free health care anywhere else like Planned Parenthood offers. And they make it sound like Planned Parenthood makes most of its money off of other healthcare services.
I know it's a joke.
It's such a joke, but this is what's interesting, right? When you take abortion off the table, they always go under financially, right? So the fact that Planned, if Planned Parenthood wants to stay open, they can't do chemical or surgical abortions. They just want to do mammograms and whatever. Fine, I don't care. I don't care about that. I don't care if they're helping women with regular healthcare stuff. I don't care. But if you can't make it without providing surgical abortion, how diverse is your business in reality? It's just not, right? So. It's a matter of time. The ordinance that was passed is not justice for the murders that are taking place. It does not provide adequate biblical justice for the murder of the unborn. But what it did was it put so much pressure on Planned Parenthood that they're not going to be able to operate. It will force them to close their doors. And we do not have babies being murdered here anymore. I call that a win. I call that a major success.
Win. Yeah. No, that's a massive, massive success. There's no doubt about it. And I mean, you're a big part, on the front lines with the signs and all the efforts that went into, making that a reality. So, huge kudos to everyone that was involved, you know what I mean? That really took the issue seriously and move forward with that. And you were telling me before that you even had you had an incident with some people, I think some women that were trying to steal your signs.
Yeah.
I think you should mention that story, and people can look it up if they're not familiar afterwards. But I think it's pretty significant. No, for me, it was very significant because, when I first heard about it, I'm like, wow, that even caught the attention, so maybe you can kind of explain a little bit about the women trying to steal your signs.
Yeah, so in Lubbock, I don't know about other places. I just know Lubbock sign laws. When it comes to a political vote, right, we're allowed to put signs in a lot of different places. Don't have to ask for permission, right? So you've got a lot of public right-of-ways and areas around sidewalks where it's fair game. Anybody can put a sign. And, Project Destiny had made a lot of signs, and in a debate like this, you tend to run into what Doug Wilson calls the tolerance buzzsaw. All of these tolerant people that want to promote love and tolerance tend to be the most intolerant and the most violent.
Isn't that the truth? Isn't that the truth?
It's the tolerance buzzsaw, right? I love that terminology. So, of course, we very peacefully put signs in places, and the opposition puts their signs where they want, and we leave their signs alone. We just like our signs to be there too, right? That's not that, what usually happens is the other side likes to destroy our signs. They're getting out of their car at 11:30 at night and secretly smashing them with their feet. And, Project Destiny didn't have an unlimited amount of money, right? Obviously, signs are expensive. They printed as many signs as they could, right, within reason. And those signs were frequently being stolen and destroyed, and so it was an uphill battle just to keep them in the appropriate places, and people did a good job of that. Well, I was very much aware of the war on signs, right? I was right in the middle of all of it, and there was I am in the service industry, so I drive around town for a living, and I kind of paid attention to where signs were getting destroyed or stolen, and if I would send a quick text off to whoever was responsible for replacing them to let them know that maybe another one needs to be here or there. And there was one lone sign, Robbie, one lone little sign hanging outside across the street from Planned Parenthood, and I passed that sign on my way to a job. I passed that sign, made sure it was still there. It was. I went and I parked my vehicle. I got out. I was a block away from the Planned Parenthood. Just by nature of my job, I had to be over there. I wasn't there to protest or do anything with Planned Parenthood, but I was about a block away. And I see these two women coming down the street with purpose and a mission, holding that sign. Now, I was not 100% sure it was the sign from Planned Parenthood, but imagine, as temperamental as this has been in my city, the fact that I see two women carrying this sign walking down the street leads me to believe that they stole the last sign from in front of Planned Parenthood, right?
Well, it was about time, right? That's surprising that it was still up, to tell you the truth.
Exactly. I mean, I was like, I just caught this, and I was like, not today. I immediately, dude, I threw my truck was still on. I was kind of hanging out looking for something. I whipped into a parking lot. I was on another street, but I could see them because there was an empty lot in an alley. And so I had a perfect vantage point to see them holding that sign, carrying it down the street. And I thought what they were doing was going to their vehicle and they were just going to take off. Yeah. And I immediately took off my work shirt. I didn't want anybody to know who I worked for. I didn't want to, I don't mind getting fired on principle. I just don't want to make it easy for people to call in complaints, right? So I took off my work shirt, parked my truck, got as far away from anything that could incriminate me to my being on duty, and I took off with my cell phone. I put my headphones on. I kind of made it look like I was just walking, just for exercise, just out walking. I had my camera ready, and I was gonna get video of them with the sign, getting into a vehicle. I was going to get their license plate, and I was going to alert the police, and I was going to actually start the process of prosecuting them. As I was approaching them, somewhat subtly, I started noticing that they had this sign. They were knocking on doors, right? Because now we're in sort of a neighborhood portion. It's a medical district that's separated by like one street, and then it's all neighborhood. They began knocking on doors, and I was trying to figure out who in their right mind steals a sign and then goes door to door with it. Like, I couldn't figure out what I was looking at. So now I'm not so much mad. I'm just which I was
confused.
Let me preface that.
Perplexed.
I was ready to. We were fixing to go to war, right? I'm fixing to get two women arrested.
Yeah.
Now I'm just perplexed as to what's happening, and nobody's answering these doors. Well, then one of them notices me walking and starts yelling at me from across the street. So now, as I'm trying to figure out a way to go engage them, I'm headed to them to engage them. They turn around, they start engaging me, and I'm like, who steals a sign, knocks on doors, and then starts yelling at random strangers in the street? So I just stand there. They come over. They start telling me all about the vote. Hey, there's a vote coming up in Lubbock. I was like, yeah, I know. That's my sign. I was like, why'd you steal my sign? It turned into a conversation. It turned out to be Bevelyn and Bevelyn Beatty and her friend Edmay, right? They had come in from Tennessee. They were here just to support the vote.
And for people that are just tuning in, that are listening to those names, they're not familiar, that is the woman that spray painted, or actually I should say she took paint with her hands in the mural that had Black Lives Matter, and she completely decimated it with black paint live for the whole world to see, and then she got arrested, and she's done a bunch of other stuff, but Beverly's done a lot of things. She's very outspoken, and Jared had no idea who he was dealing with when he was running up to these women.
No, I had no idea. And that's the thing. I had seen those videos, and
you just you didn't put two and two together, or you really hadn't followed. You haven't really followed her stuff much yet.
No, not regularly. So when
I'm surprised too. I'm surprised too, because she talks about, like, getting demons out of freaking everyone she comes in contact with. So I thought you guys would be, right in accord with one another, from the early days, because she's quite the little exorcist herself.
Well, it was a funny meeting. So, when I realized that we're not enemies, we just kind of we just kind of hit it off. We had some real small talk. I explained to him the situation and what was happening. I just said, no, I can get another sign here. Don't worry about it. She kind of hit Edmay with the sign. I remember she kind of whapped her with it a little. She's like, you see, I told you. It was really cool at that point. Like, it wasn't a big deal. They needed something to canvas with, right?
For sure.
And everything about what they did was above board. It just was.
I mean, how long a distance is it? Like, do they fly? Do they drive there? I mean, how did they get there?
I don't know. See, to me, I everything was so busy. My schedule was so tight. Once I found out they weren't my enemy, I didn't care, right?
I'm just surprised that they were there, because, I mean, that's a long way, from Tennessee. Is it not?
It is. It's probably like, from here to Nashville, it's 17 hours.
Yeah, I can't see them driving. I mean, they must have flown into, like, Dallas, Fort Worth or whatever, and then maybe taken the vehicle from there or somewhere close, but I just can't see them driving 17 hours to start going door to door. I mean, I know that they're pretty, on the front lines, but I just have a funny feeling with the fact that they're driving 17 hours to go door to door talking about what's happening in Lubbock, Texas. But I could be wrong. Now,
and I did not, like I said, I did not get details from them, but they were speaking at one of the larger churches in town. That's a little more, it's not, I wouldn't say it's like a liberal church, but it's a little more secular. It's like big, flashy lights, lots of rock concerts, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
They were speaking there, so I'm not sure if the church brought them in or if they teamed up with the church when they got there. But, like, that next morning, I saw on Facebook she was meeting with anybody that wanted to show up and go canvassing. They were meeting in that church parking lot. So she somehow got networked with people in Lubbock. So whether or not she flew or drove, I don't know. But she definitely had people here on the ground that she networked with at some point in time prior to or when she got here. But what's funny is when they were explaining to me they'd come all the way from Tennessee, I was just really grateful that it was the first time I realized that what we were doing was actually I'm so folk tunnel vision in the middle of dealing with stuff. I did not realize how many people nationwide were watching what was happening.
That's right. That's right.
And so I did not realize how big a story this was. I just knew that we had to do everything we could to keep this from happening in our backyard. That's all I knew, right?
Well, that's the thing, too. I think sometimes when we're looking locally, we just think, hey, this is just, going to affect local and, you got that tunnel vision, but you really don't know the ripple effect. You don't know how much, effect it's going to have outside. Take my old church, for example. I mean, who would have guessed that my former pastor would literally become a beacon of the first pastor to ever be jailed for having a church service in North America? But already, that's just rippling. I mean, right across the world. And here it was, this is my former pastor that, did marriage counseling with my wife and I. So it's just crazy to think that, what you're doing there in Lubbock, Texas, again, I'm reading, 3 days ago in Forbes right now about it, right? And talking about the ramifications and what's going on. So it's just unbelievable what takes place. And I think that's something that's important for everyone to understand, is it's so important on the local front to get involved. People are talking about the federal level and all this stuff, but really I think for America specifically, it's so important to get involved in your school system, to get involved, on your local, even state level. Would you not agree? Has it opened your eyes a little bit to be more involved maybe in the system itself, rather than just ignoring it or just saying, oh, what can I do?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because I've always been somewhat cognizant of the fact that real politics needs to take place locally and work outward, right, up to the top. Everybody focuses on these big votes and nothing ever changes. The local stuff matters far more than people realize, but it tends to be what people are the least concerned with. And you're right. Like when Ed May and Bevlin were talking about being from Tennessee, I didn't even get their names. I didn't even ask them their names. There were a lot of local groups I knew would be appreciative of the fact that. So
you just threw that picture up and said, "Hey, I just got a picture." Even when you put up the picture, you didn't know who it was, or you knew at that point. Who told you who they were?
Okay, so that's So I was a part of a lot of I was part of private groups.
Okay.
Like strategy groups
Makes
on
sense.
Facebook,
Okay.
just locally, right? So it was a way we communicated inside these volunteer organizations. So it was just small groups of people, and I asked them when I found out they were from Tennessee. I said, "Hey, that's really awesome. You guys are here. You mind if I just take a selfie? I'll post it in these small groups, just to let people know that you guys are awesome and that you're here. You were helping us. Like they'd love to just see, oh wow, these two amazing women.
Sure.
We're here to help, right? That's it.
Yeah.
That was the only point. So I took a selfie with them. It was just a cool picture.
Right? I know. Yeah, I remember seeing the picture. It's pretty cool that they never really even mentioned it either. Like, because I mean, I would say somewhat they're pretty much famous to the fact of what took place last year, and especially Bev in her rise of kind of going against the system, against the woke culture, and she's been incredibly vocal and very, very strong in preaching the gospel. I might add, and just seeing kind of how her audience grew. It's interesting how she didn't, not in a prideful bragging way, but like, do you know who I am kind of thing? You know what I mean? Like you would think on that level it should be operating on like never once. Yeah, interesting. Very cool.
They're obvious. Just to me, they were just normal random strangers. And they asked me something. I told them, we were talking about the neighborhoods they were canvassing. I was like, go down to Texas Tech, the university. You got like a massive population of people you can fight with down there. Where is that? I'm like, gave them directions, and I was like, I had to go. I was like, all right, you guys, we're cool. I was like, all right, you guys, hey, let me take that's when I said, I got to go. And I turned and said, hey, let me get a picture. Nice. Let me get a picture with you guys real quick, just so I can put it in the local groups here, let them know, like, hey, you guys are awesome. And they'd love to see it. And so I took a picture and I was like, all right, guys, peace. Hey, good luck. Thanks for your help. And I took off running, right? Yeah. Well, Tom follows him. My buddy,
of course. Yeah.
Black. He's been following for a long time. So then he sent me a link to a they were Facebook live streaming.
That's what I was going to say. I was curious why they wouldn't be live streaming.
He goes, these women are here in your area. Like, that'd be so cool if you get to meet them. And I look down, I start watching this live stream. I was like, I just had a confrontation with these women, like in 2 hours ago.
I almost rushed them for the sign. I was almost going to smack them.
I sent Tom that picture back, and he was just, he's a big fan of those guys. And so he was kind of, I was like, I already met him. I was like, I had no idea. That's the lady. Oh, yeah. And then he told me, I was like, oh, that's the lady that was in New York that did the thing with the paint. And
the mural,
then I was like, you know what? I posted that picture on Facebook, and I said, wow. Because other people had the picture. I was like, who knew when I took this picture that these people were actually famous? I was like, and I love the picture even all the more because I'm super genuinely stoked to meet these women. but not because I know who they are, but just because they were there helping, right?
Yeah, no, for
and
sure.
So that picture was as genuine a picture as it could possibly be.
Totally. I know. That's what's so bizarre about that, because you see this like selfie and I'm thinking, hey, how did he not know when he's taking a selfie with these girls? Like, obviously, who does that, right? But it totally makes sense.
I don't even take selfies, dude. I don't even take selfies with people, but I was just like, for some reason, it was so cool that these two random women were from Tennessee, because that's how passionate we were here. Like, if you're, like, it's like a war, you know, you've got so many people that hate your guts because it's such an ideological.
Other soldiers coming in with the fight.
Yeah.
No, I hear you.
It's like, wow, man, you're going door to door with us, going toe to toe. Thank you. You know, it was just.
Did you actually afterwards, like, and I don't know if you did just out of curiosity, but did you watch more videos, like more of her popular videos where she's, you know, quite in the face of different, you know, topics and stuff. But God bless her. Anyways, she's got courage. I'll tell you that.
I followed her on Facebook, and then I pretty much only watched the videos that were being live streamed from Lubbock. Because then, when they had when we won the vote, she was there that day. There were some speeches made from a church. I watched those just to kind of keep up. You know, it's kind of like a Super Bowl. You know, you just like of epic of life and death proportions. You know, you just.
Yeah,
it was anyway. It's
really cool. It's really cool. I mean, obviously, she's fighting on many fronts, and it's just another example of, you know, really taking the whole issue of fighting for the unborn life and all that. Just makes it even that much more real, for sure. You know, that she's, you know, on that front as well, and that's interesting. I'd be very curious to know if it was the church that brought her in or what. You know what I mean? Like, how does she arrive there? And I mean, if someone's bringing you in, you're going to start hitting door to door. Does that seem like, it seems so strange, right? It's like, yeah, church wants to bring you in, and in the meantime, I'm just going to start going door to door. But again, I mean, that's just kind of, I guess, the way that she rolls, because she's been very vocal.
There was a big strategy in door to door, though. She had a list. There was a list because there were a lot of people that were canvassing. So I know that she wasn't leading the canvassing movement. She was somehow a part of it.
Oh, I see.
What Paul did, the guy that I mentioned earlier, I'm not sure if he was the brainchild behind this or not, but he was the first person that explained it to me. We were able to pull the voter registration records, and remember I told you the strategy that we had was to target churches and conservatives. So going after the churches is kind of what I did, right? I did my part. There were a lot of other people that didn't need to go after churches. Other people had already taken those jobs, and they got the voter registration list of conservative Republican voters, and they were going to the addresses of registered Republican voters. So what we were trying to do on that side of things with the canvassing was target conservative voters to let them know. So we weren't going door to door indiscriminately. Yeah. We were very discriminately going door to door just to let conservatives know the vote was happening, to get people out to vote. So it was very much if you know, that's what made the intersection thing a little more controversial, was we don't want to raise too much awareness to people that, you know, because you just don't know, man. Like,
what happened after that? By the way, what happened with your church? Not to pick on your church, but I'm talking about more the congregants. Did anyone mention anything to you after the fact, after the great victory of what took place? Like, was there any more dialogue? I'm not talking so much with the elders or with leadership. I'm just talking in general, just with the church.
Yeah, the people that I know there that were watching this, they had watched every step of my interactions with the church and with the volunteer effort, and I was kind of like a point of information for what was happening. And so they were very pleased, obviously. Mm-hmm. They were very disheartened by the church's decisions, but I got a lot of very complimentary texts and phone calls and conversations, you know, that were just like, that was, you know, pretty much saying, we've never seen something like this happen before. Like, everything that you guys did was just like, we were really impressed with how everything was handled. Right.
Oh,
so
yep.
We were able to, and they voted. I mean, we got all of those people went out to vote and told other people to go out to vote, but it forced them to have to really think about their future relationship with the church as well. Right. Yeah. So now I'm not a spokesman for anything, and sure. I wasn't a rallying point for a split in the church. I know that our church started hemorrhaging members, though. It seemed very clear in private conversations that this was a do or die topic for a lot of people.
Sure.
So a lot of people I didn't even know that, didn't even know what we were doing. They chose to leave. See, so, long story short, and this is kind of, to your question, although a little bit different. I never went back to my church after that.
Okay.
I had that because this was once the elders convened and gave me the list of bullet points why they would remove themselves from the conversation. I told my wife that we are going to leave the church when I'm done with the protest. Essentially, I'm going to do my duty. I will.
Did you write them a letter? Did you write them a letter, something to just kind of, a farewell, kind of something to chew on, to pray about, to think about?
I'll tell you the whole story.
Okay,
so,
cool.
I'd had a very short conversation. The whole chain of communication started like this. I had a short conversation with the pastor. We're not friends. We're not even really acquaintances, but he recognizes my face. I've been going there for like 4 or 5 years, right?
Sure.
So I just caught him at the right time, said, hey, now's not the time, but the vote's coming up, and I would love to have a conversation with you or an elder about it. Give me some time in the future so we can have a longer conversation. He said, yeah, that'd be great. I'm going out of town. I'll get you in contact with my secretary. And he gave me his private email address to make sure that we could converse quickly. Mm-hmm. And he said, I'll get you either me or an elder, depending on what the schedule looks like. I'll get you a meeting, right? We'll set it up. I'll approve it. Great. Thanks, man. Great. And I left it alone. I wasn't going to fight with him in the lobby. He's got three more sermons to preach, right?
Yeah.
So, I did. I stayed on top of it. I got an email. I was able to set up a meeting with an elder. I met with that elder. We had a 15-minute conversation. I presented him with the information. I pretty much told him I wanted him to go to an elder meeting, and I wanted all the elders to discuss this, and that's what happened. So I told him I wanted a follow-up. If they decided not to support the ordinance, I wanted to know why. They had my cell phone number. They had my email address. I told him, no matter what, I'm going to follow up on this.
Yeah.
See, let me put it to this was my problem in the elder meeting that I had. My church speaks at pro-life fundraisers.
Oh, wow.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. Right. So that's not something I brought up
earlier. Now the plot thickens.
The pastor speaks at. There's a place here called the Park Ridge Pregnancy Center, which does a lot. There's a big fundraiser / gala thing that they do. Right. You pay $1,000 for a table, that sort of fundraiser. Right. And he speaks there, right? And I really just I couldn't in my right mind see how he wouldn't support this, given the outpouring of being publicly vocal about being pro-life.
Yeah.
It was blowing my mind that they would just ignore this, right? And there were other nuanced reasons why, but they weren't good reasons. It's just not worth getting into in this show. But, every one of these situations, it's relationships and it's complicated, right? So I told the guy essentially in the elders meeting that I understand why you guys are trying to distance yourself from this, or I understand some of the reasons that you guys have been public about, but here's why you can't. I provided them a list of resources. I also said, I know I don't have to convince you that pro-life is bad, but essentially, let me explain. This is what I had to say to the elder. Let me explain something to you. If the church does not show up to vote, if the church does not do its job in raising awareness to get people out to vote, we will lose this, right? We will lose this ordinance, and then we will have a fully functioning abortion facility in our backyard. And I was like, as vocal as the elders and the pastor has been about being pro-life, let me explain something to you. If we lose this, and this facility is practicing abortions, and anybody from church leadership shows up to hold a sign protesting this, when you refuse to do anything to prevent this from being a reality in the first place, I am going to lose my mind, right? Mm-hmm. And made it very clear that we might have a confrontation outside, right? Don't even show up and protest this clinic if you're not willing to put a stop to its existence, right?
Yeah.
And I wanted to call the hypocrisy out early. Well, obviously that they went a different direction. So we went, I got the follow-up. They sent me the official list of bullet points. I shared those bullet points with every pastor in town that wanted to know, because they were confused as to the stance that this church was taking. It was very disheartening to a lot of pastors. So as other people approached different pastors that had been made aware of this official response, And I wasn't doing anything wrong. This was their official response. You know, this had gone through a meeting. This was their official response. I shared it with everybody, right? So I wasn't violating any confidence.
Sure.
Pastors started recommending to people, asking them, leave the church. That's not a viable church anymore. You can't in good conscience stay there. So there were people that started vacating. I decided to stay on long enough just to do my official protest, because I felt as a member of the church, just like we talked about earlier, I need to do everything I can to raise awareness and talk to the other members. And that's how I did it. And I decided that as soon as we were done and the vote was over, that I would revoke my membership. And so I'd already had plenty of conversation. The vote was over. We won the ordinance. I decided it was time to leave the church. There's no way I was going to stay there at this point. Because of all the things, critical race theory, intersectionality, their stance on COVID, their willingness to adopt tyranny, to make masks mandatory for worship. I am never going to be okay with mandatory physical prerequisites for people to worship God ever, right? It's just apart from biblical, like you have to wear clothes to church. You can't show up naked. Like I'm cool with that, but you know what I mean? So anyway, there were a lot of other issues, but this was my final straw. So then I had my wife call the church office and say, hey, we want to not even being rude. We're going to start the process. How do we revoke our church membership? A lot of the people that left the church were just leaving. They weren't going to tell anybody, but I needed for me to make this more official. I'm leaving. You need to know I'm leaving. I've been a member in good standing. I don't want to be anymore. Right. And, so I was told by this church staff that, okay, so you're not just moving, like you're actually just leaving the church and going to a different church. It's like, yes, that's happening. They're like, well, then the elders would like to meet with you probably. You know, there will be an elder exit meeting. I was like, fantastic.
Yeah.
You know, like it was like, you know, are you okay with that? Yeah, absolutely. I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
So anyway, she said there will be certain people in touch with you that'll schedule it. And I told my wife, there's no way. There's no way, because the second my name comes up, they already know what I'm about. This has already been an ongoing thing. They'll just cut me loose.
Yeah.
And I waited for that confirmation of an elder exit meeting.
Yeah.
It didn't come.
Yeah.
Finally, I did get a phone call. We got a phone call and an email. No, I got an email from the pastor directly. That's what happened, because we had been in communication for that early elder meeting. I got an email from the pastor directly, asking me, I just became aware that you guys have expressed the desire to revoke your church membership. I'm sorry to hear that. Would it help to have an exit meeting? And at this point, I already know he's deflecting, right? It's like, and I told him I would love to. I told him very honestly, like, I'm not interested in having a conversation where I'm just yelling at you or I'm angry.
Yeah.
I was like, I explained to him over the last year and a half. I was very polite. I said, I cannot imagine what it's like to be a pastor during one of the most polarizing times in human history, right? Modern human history.
Yeah.
But I told him the last year and a half has been a blessing in that it's forced me to dig deep, to look at things like Protestant theory of resistance, our relationship to tyrannical government, all these different things. And I've had to figure out what I think about them from a biblical worldview. And I was like, and I found myself at the end of my studies on the opposite end of almost every decision this church has made. And I was like, if you would like to have that exit conversation, I would be more than happy to have a loving one, not one that's contentious, but one where I express my opinions and ideas. And I was like, and then I'll exit stage left, right?
Yeah.
And it was one of those, well, my schedule is really busy. Maybe it's just better that we just part ways. And it's like, okay, I did everything I could to make myself available, to make sure people knew where I stood, but to do it lovingly. Yeah. And that's it. So they said, essentially, I'd just be removed from the church roster, the emails. I'm no longer a member, and I could just go on. So I just took it and left.
So are you in the middle of church hopping, or what's going on now?
Yeah, in the meantime, I already, for the last, the 2 or 3 months prior to me leaving, I had already started scoping new churches out. Gotcha. I knew the writing was on the wall.
Sure.
There was a Reformed church with a pastor by the name of Mark Sharp, and I kind of just started forming a small acquaintanceship with him. He was very heavily active in this movement. One of the only street preachers that was showing up outside the clinic and offering assistance to these women. And we hit it off. We had coffee. We talked about the Puritans and,
that's cool.
Some of the things I was into. And so I actually started kind of going to his church every other week for a few months just to start forming a relationship, and that's where I've been going. I'm not a member yet. I usually
you should ask him though sometime just before you make your decision if it's okay that you question the shape of the Earth.
Oh, originally he had asked me about some. He had asked me about something came up. I told him I'd pretty much done a lot of speaking.
Yeah. And
he asked me about about the YouTube channel. So I actually went and found the Flat Earth talk that I gave.
Nice.
And because I said, listen, dude, I was like, I'm all over the place, Flat Earth conferences, wherever, like I've been everywhere. I just sent him a bunch of videos. I was like, pretty much take it or leave it. And he seems to like me. No,
that's powerful. Like, the Flat Earth International Conference speech that you gave, honestly, super, super powerful. So I'm sure he was pretty impressed, as many people were when they heard you there, because you didn't really talk much at all about Flat Earth, right? But it was more about the underlying evil.
That's never been my jam. Like, I love the Flat Earth stuff. I'm super interested in Flat Earth stuff. But it's like when it comes to our subspecialties, like get me out there. Let me preach the gospel. Let's.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's why, you're in Scientism Exposed too, but then also even having you speak at the Flat Earth International Conference, there was a specific reason for that. And I understood that, that wasn't going to be the forefront. But again, it was important for me understanding. And we talked about this before when I, had that calling about being the last conference and stepping down. I said, Jared, this is even more important now. You know what I mean? Like whatever you're going to be talking about. So, and I ended off the conference with Nathan Reynolds, with him, finalizing it. And both you and him really didn't touch on the intricacies of anything to do with the Earth. It was more about the spiritual world we find ourselves in, and just laying that out, which I thought was really good. So I need to ask you a question though. With all of this, what would you say for people that are listening in? Obviously they're coming from different places. What would you do to encourage them about maybe becoming active, or, what would you say overall to the radio audience as far as getting, just more involved with these type of things, seeing the incredible victory and such an important issue? But there's so many different things that are going on. We were talking about critical race theory. We're talking about things that are creeping into the education system that, just make your hair, stand up. Truly, there's some very, very sinister, satanic stuff, Marxist, communist, any which way you look at it. But what I'm saying is people need to become more active on the local level. And maybe, you could maybe speak to that about encouraging people to do that and see what comes of it.
Yeah, I think that it's very important. Oftentimes, some of the ministries, people look at ministry like standing outside of an abortion clinic, and they might hear some of the success stories and they start to romanticize it, right? Like they have an idea that when they show up, it's going to be one thing, but really it really is just a lot of long. I haven't done this as much as some people, right? But like in reality, you're at odds with a lot of people. It's not glamorous. You're out in the sun all day, a lot of times by yourself, and you feel funny because you're like. I stood on major intersections in Lubbock holding a 4x4 sign completely by myself for hours.
Wow.
To people yelling and screaming at me, or honking their horn in approval. It's a very vulnerable thing. But what I knew was that it is a powerful thing to just put the truth on display is a powerful thing. Mm-hmm. To just hold a sign, even though you feel vulnerable outside of an abortion clinic that says abortion is murder, forces people to think about the issue. True leadership forces awkward conversations. It's awkward for everybody. The difference between followers and leaders is leaders are willing to be awkward, right? Yeah. Really, in many respects. And so, a lot of people wait till other kids are playing in the sandbox to get in with them, but there's always the first kid in the sandbox, and everybody else thinks what he's doing is fun and they want to get involved. Be the first kid to do something worthwhile that everybody else wants to come and hang out with you and play with, Mm-hmm. Don't wait for it to be a thing. Start the thing. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't, I would say, for some of the motivation on some of the best practices, go find Jeff Durbin's videos, his Apologia stuff on YouTube, his endabortionnow.com stuff. There are lots of resources on that website that in places to team up. I'm not affiliated with them. I don't know him. He has never heard my name in his life. But when you watch these videos and you hear the testimonies, you see how a simple presence outside of an abortion clinic can save a life.
Yeah.
It can force a person to think twice about what they're doing if they're already on the fence. And God uses people outside these clinics passively to do amazing things in saving the lives of the unborn. And, have a conference. If you're able to, eventually you get enough people, you can raise awareness, create more resources. Essentially what you can do is you can find people in your area that are willing to donate services so that, when people show up to these abortion clinics, you have actual resources available to give to these women at no charge, right? That give them other alternatives. Sometimes that's something I've learned this year is sometimes these women are going to Planned Parenthood because they don't feel like they have other options.
Correct.
Some of the most amazing stories I've ever heard involved guys standing outside the clinic, and all they had to say was, "We will adopt your baby."
Yeah. For
that woman to realize, oh wow, I have other options.
Sure.
Abortion isn't the only option. And then after a chain of events, that baby is alive and healthy and hanging out with the mom. And a lot of these women are scared, right? And just being active, proactive, and present can save lives. It can save lives.
Yeah, no, I think that's 100%. And, in our society, though, it just seems so backwards where people are caring almost so much more for animals than human life, right? I mean, if the same thing was going on, with animals, I mean, you'd have animal rights and they would just be fighting back and, they would be protesting. And that's the whole bottom line is here. This is for babies. This is for innocent babies. And I mean, what a great thing to stand for. I think a lot of people have images of these crazy people at abortion clinics, where's that bomber or something like that, and everyone makes a big deal of that. That's like exceptions to the rule. Most times it's not nasty. No one's calling for the violence against anyone, and I don't think you should be part of any movement where they're calling for the violence against anyone, A, that's getting an abortion, or B, that is performing an abortion, right? It's evil, it's wrong, and you should voice it. But again, you should never be violent towards anyone. That's 100%.
It was funny. I kind of created a slogan here on a personal level, with my private arguments and stuff, just like you brought up with the animals and stuff. You got PETAs out there. They're all about saving the whales, killing the babies, right? There's rather than putting their efforts into something valuable and saving human lives, they're all about, ridiculous movements. It was interesting.
Well, it's one thing if it was consistent, right? It's not even consistent. It's flipped. It's flipped upside down where all of a sudden animals are more protected than babies or human lives. Exactly. It seems to me like, and then you start getting into other realms where they're going to start, in my opinion, start pushing euthanasia a lot more and different, methods. Because again, when it goes into life, it's not usually just one directional. It usually happens in the span of older age as well. So older life will come into jeopardy here soon too. And who's going to protect the seniors? Because quite honestly, as sick and disturbing as Marxist and communist regimes are, they usually head that way, right? Look at Sanger with Planned Parenthood. She wasn't just talking about in one direction. She was also looking at euthanasia. She was looking at, eugenics. And with eugenics comes a lot of different, maybe mentally handicapped. Hey, who's, like you just said before at the beginning of the show, you said it's a slippery slope when you start determining someone that cannot live on their own or they need help, or they need assistance. Well, there's a lot of people in our societies that might need assistance. Does that mean it disqualifies them from having a life? Maybe we should exterminate them because, they're just a drain on the system.
Well, it was funny because in the middle of the protesting and the sign holding and all of the stuff that was taking place here, that border crisis was at its fullest, right? I don't know if you were paying attention, but we had this Biden's promise to immigrants. Everybody's flocking across the border.
It's a crazy crisis. What's going on at the border?
Listen to this. They're all jammed up in cages and stuff. And you've got people here, they're like a lot of liberals here were begging, like, just let them out in the United States. And I'm thinking at the same time, they're making the same argument that we should kill these children because they would be poverty stricken, right? They would be on the system. But yet they're we can't afford them as a nation. It hurts your tax dollars. We can't afford these kids on the dole. They'll all be on food stamps. But yet they were making a case to just let immigrants in where they'd be taken by the government. And I just saw the absurdity and inconsistency and hypocrisy of the argument. So I started, every time this came up out there, I just started saying, no, let's save the babies and kill the immigrants, essentially just to argue.
Well, those immigrants can vote. Those immigrants can vote, right? And so part of their
thing, right?
Their plan is the new voters. Yeah.
even though they didn't articulate it like this, the argument was, we'll kill these babies, but we'll take care of the immigrants. So no, let's save the babies and kill the immigrants. And then you were able to get into a conversation, and it was like, what are you talking about? Like, well, your argument's not any better. It's actually quite worse. So. Yeah,
I can imagine how well that would go over, right? Jared with a sign, save the babies, kill the immigrants. Hey, just as a discussion though, right? Just as a discussion point.
Arguing from absurdity.
No, 100%.
It's a tactic that shows them the absurdity of their own argument, right? And that's what you do.
100%.
Yeah.
Well, Jared, this has been amazing. I'm so glad we were able to have you on and be able to go through the entire story, what's going on there. What do you think is on the horizon for other cities, other towns? I mean, you said you see this spreading.
Okay, so, and I'll do this real quick.
Sure.
For months prior to the vote actually taking place, it was understood that there were many cities around us that were watching what happened here, and and I don't want to get into too many details because Planned Parenthood is crafty, right? Mm-hmm. But there were already movements in place to adopt sanctuary city ordinances to all of the major locations around us where Planned Parenthood might up and try to move to, right? So there was already a strategic plan in place to start shutting off their ability to even set up a location. That has already been taking effect. Some major cities within 2.5 to 3 hours of us are already in the process of getting this passed through their city council. There are small towns around us that their city council was just on board. They didn't even have to worry about an abortion facility, but they're like, you know what? Let's pass the ordinance anyway.
Yeah.
And what I'm loving is even in lots of small towns where there's really no chance of a Planned Parenthood or an abortion facility at all establishing itself, they're still passing the ordinance to help establish a new legal precedent. And what it does is it completely eliminates places Planned Parenthood will even ever be able to have a foothold in. And that is a beautiful thing.
No, 100%. No, it definitely gives a lot of hope. I was actually surprised when I read the headlines and spoke to you a week or so ago. I was like, really? Like, this is actually happening? Like, I was in disbelief. I'm like, really? There's actually places in the United States that this is actually taking place. It's really, really.
Lebanon, Ohio was the last one I heard.
Correct.
This week it passed.
Correct. I just saw that. I saw that in the Forbes article that just came out 3 days ago. They were talking about Lebanon, Ohio. So not Lebanon, Ohio, people. So
the list is a mile long right now, from what I understand.
That's
for
very
people
cool.
Applying for the sanctuary city stuff. Yep, that's cool.
Well, keep us up to date on what's happening. If there's any changes and anyone wants to get involved, I want to make sure I get to plug your new YouTube channel. So that was news to me, Jared 2.0, and it looks like you started about a month ago. Your first video was about a month ago, so it's Jared 2.0. You can subscribe there. I'll have put a link in the description here later. But you've got 6 videos.
If you go, there are quite a bit more. If you just go into the playlist, we got a bunch of eschatology.
Oh, you
stuff.
do. You got lots in there. Sorry, yeah, I hit videos. You got lots going on there now. So sweet, yeah. Eschatology. You've got the Lubbock's fight to ban abortion with Jim Baxa in there. That was 2 weeks ago. So you got lots of content.
Some book
going
reviews.
Up. Book reviews.
It's just a hobby channel, man. I just like take my personal interest and just dump it onto the channel and still keep a presence and kind of do what I do.
You still need to write a book. Still, I've been saying this for a long time, but I'm waiting for you to write your book. I think
maybe one of these days.
Yeah, I'm sure you will. I have a feeling you're gonna be writing a book at some point. It's coming up soon. You're gonna be like, yep, it's time. I'm going to write a book. But I'd love to get you on again so we could talk about more things that are happening, creeping into the church. You were talking about critical race theory. I've been doing a lot of research on that. I think that is a massive cancer that's coming. People need to really be wised up and researched on that. It's bad. It's vicious. It's moving into the medical system. It's moving into the military. This is bad. This is reminiscent of, Nazi Germany. And, keep in mind that it was the doctors and nurses that were the main profession that pushed on the agenda for the state. And it seems like they're trying to do the same thing again with the medical professionals. This is where people really need to speak out, and definitely all of these agendas that are all coming to place. Good people are standing up, making a difference, just like we heard tonight. So blessings to you, Jared. Thank you so much for coming on. And
thanks, bud.
Everyone, stay tuned. We'll have more next week. Celebrate Truth Radio, the 24/7 stream will continue on about 5-10 minutes after this radio show ends on YouTube. So stay tuned for that if you want to check in there. And my special still is going on with celebratetruth.org. You can get a free DVD with any order. That's celebratetruth.org. And you can grab my DVDs, book, so much more, all there at the website, or you can grab it on Amazon. But the deal is only offered at celebratetruth.org. So really appreciate everyone tonight. Thank you so much for tuning in. Blessings all.